As Aaron mentioned, my name is David Issa. I'm the Chief Experience Officer for Point Clear Solutions, in my and as well as Worry-Free Labs, which is our subsidiary that is focused on mobile app design and development. In my role as CXO, I am largely responsible for the performance and quality of our user experience and visual design practices across the portfolio of projects that we have. Today, I will be speaking with you about strategies for approaching design as it relates to mobile projects. These are principles and approaches that we teach our staff to help ensure the continual delivery of high quality and forward-thinking designs on a routine basis, no matter what project kind of comes through the door. However, before we dive deep into mobile-specific topics, I'm going to take a quick moment to just talk about design and what design is in the context of this conversation. People often approach me and want to show me, either a design for their app or their website, and they ask me the question, "Do you like this?" or "What do you think?" And frankly, the question around whether or not I like a design is the wrong question, because it implies that my personal subjectivity and aesthetic is what drives quality in design, for example. And this is grossly inaccurate in many ways. But what exactly is great design then? Mark Bolton, he is the design director at a company called Monotype, an agency called Monotype, and an author of Designing for the Web and Web Standards Creativity books. And he has this wonderful quote that I feel answers this brilliantly, and that is, "Design is not art. It is about crafting solutions to real issues." In many ways, art has the luxury of being subjective. Design, however, does not, because it either solves a real problem out in the world, or it is art. We do not, and in our firm, what we do not do is we do not design for just design's sake, which is going to lead me into a little while back, there was a blog article entitled "The Dribblization of Design" that began to talk about this difference between art and design, and how the dribble community rewards superficial work. For those of you who don't know, Dribbble is a social platform that allows designers to kind of show and tell snippets of their work while it's in progress or even completed, to receive feedback from others. The platform, as a result, is host to some incredibly beautiful work. But to highlight this, the author of that article, Paul Adams, posited this question. He presented, these different designs and said only one of these weather apps is attempting to solve the real problem. And can you tell which one it is? So I'll give you just a quick moment to think about that. And in this, if you chose the humble design in the lower right-hand corner, then you are correct. And let's ask ourselves why that is. What Paul Adams is asking the audience to do in this context was look really beyond the superficial and subjectivity that is presented in a lot of the other designs. All of these examples, showcase artistic skill, but the design in the lower right-hand corner is the only one that is really attempting to understand and get at the root of the problem for the user, which is, why do people even have weather apps to begin with in the first place? And that is largely because they want to know how to dress, or as the example showcases, whether or not they need to bring something like an umbrella or wear a raincoat for their day's journey ahead. The other examples listed here, while all, as I mentioned earlier, show artistic capabilities and have good personality and flair, are subjected to what we would call the subjectivity of the user, and whether or not they like that. And framed in a different way, the design legend Dieter Rams, said as one of his 10 principles, good design is long lasting. It avoids being fashionable and therefore never appears antiquated. Unlike fashionable design, it lasts many years, even in today's throwaway society. Uh, and the importance of this is that design is not meant to be trendy just for a specific moment in time, but rather to drive the point that design has to work and art does not. So creating long-lasting design doesn't mean you need to create necessarily high glossy displays, like this, which I do find to be a very well-designed app and has incredible graphic design attributes associated to it. But it could also come in the form of something much more minimalist, like this. And for those of you who don't know this is an app called Writer by Information Architects, which is focused on helping writers write, in a distraction-free environment, offering a clean canvas. And the feature that's being showcased here is their so-called focus mode, so that the user can focus on the sentence at hand. In a different context, we offer something like this. This is To Do. It's a to-do app, well designed to kind of give users an immediate feel for where they are in their week and what needs to get done. The bottom line is, if you focus on designing for the user's needs, then great design will follow. And that it doesn't need to necessarily be something that has tremendous amounts of artistic talent that's being showcased, but rather the restraint to showcase the focus on the app's focus on the user's need and intent. So what does all of this actually mean for mobile? Well, approaching mobile design as it relates to focusing on the user's need offers great opportunities and challenges. Namely, mobile offers us the opportunity to engage with users within a variety of contexts as they walk through their life. Doing this well and appropriately can be very challenging, though, as opposed to writing, for example, a desktop or web application where we can better predict how and when users might engage with a piece of software. This is why I've written on the slide, for example, that no, the approach is not exactly the same as the web. So first and perhaps most important rule to approaching mobile design is to live and by the user journey. And the user's journey, especially in mobile, involves touch points with so many other external factors. The journey map is key to not only identifying features for a product or app, but also prioritizing these features, for development and understanding which touch points, are key. In this example, as you can see here in this image for mortgage products, the customer journey includes both an online and offline experience. Knowing these details alone help designers to identify the key touch points an app may have with a user, and helps us kind of to come up and prioritize the features that meet their needs within the larger context of their lives, or over the course of actually purchasing and getting a mortgage product. How we map and present the information for journey maps can take multiple incarnations. And here is another example of that that is a little bit more textual in its context. The more important facet is that it tells a story over time of how we expect users to engage with our product or service offering. You see, and it helps to highlight, as the user moves, through the course of time and throughout their lives, at which points we anticipate that they'll want to engage with us, and helps us to begin to answer the question of why they're engaging with us at those specific points. And in this example, we are showcasing from one of our kickoff sessions where we developed these journey maps in a collaborative fashion using a much more lower fidelity version in paper. One last point on Journey Map specifically is just, as we begin to consider the different types of user interfaces that are beginning to enter our environment, and these interfaces begin to splinter with new innovations such as the Apple Watch, Google Glass, the Amazon Echo, deeply understanding and refining our understanding of the user journey is only going to become more important as we begin to try to make difficult decisions about how and when to engage with users, and then also how these users are ultimately going to engage with our products or services through a variety of mediums. Then another unique facet that mobile and really modern web development really has brought to the surface is the notion that we're not designing pages. We're designing systems of components. Moreover, as interfaces continue to splinter across platforms and devices, as I mentioned earlier, it's more important than ever that we begin to think of systems as a collection of micro interactions rather than a collection of web pages. In this slide, Brad Frost came up with a notion of atomic design, which is methodology for creating what he calls design systems. As you can see in this slide, he breaks components down into parts called atoms. They come together to form, molecules like the navigation bar or header systems. And those, then can be collected into organisms, templates, and ultimately pages. What is important here is not that you follow, his specific flavor or methodology, but rather that you begin to think of your solution as a living, breathing organism that's made up of these many smaller components. From a design perspective, I should say. This will create greater alignment between your design teams and your development teams, and it also allows you to focus and refine user interactions at that micro interaction or atomic level, which eventually bubbles up to the system level. When you think and test atomically, the experience of the system as a whole will increase through detailed attention to very specific, user interactions, such as, search states or drop-down states, as well as design consistency across your app. What we try to provide a lot of clients with moving forward now is a component library, of which you see an example here, that can then become the atoms, for their system. And that their developers and their designers can rally around and continue to test and focus intensely on. As we mentioned in the Journey Map section, sort of knowing the context your users will use your app in is paramount to informing the right design. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people sort of design a mobile app and then never actually thought to look at what the design looks like in the environment the user will leverage it in. Decisions, around like whether or not to go with a light or dark theme for the app, should not be, the result of arbitrary preference, but rather driven by environmental factors. An app we expect to be used outside in the sunlight can and probably should have a very bright white display to kind of help with the visibility. Conversely, apps that we have designed and intended for use while driving, or say within a movie theater, if you will, or a Broadway play, for example, should have a more muted display to kind of avoid unnecessary distractions. We've probably all seen that person in the dark room. They open up the white, a white app, and it just, shines very brightly out there. So as we begin to look how these users are using the app and the environments that they're going to be using it in, as we design it, it's really important that you get that design onto the mobile phone and go into the environment that you expect for it to be used, and begin to consider, how it sits within the larger context of the user's journey. And then last but not least, when we approach, mobile design, it's important to understand that you need to prepare yourself for the long run. Quality user experience and design is a long run game. And as new technologies come into the marketplace, user behaviors change. Mobile has done wonders for bringing many new users and services into the digital world. But just because we know or have identified something as an ideal experience does not mean that it is ready for every industry or every use case that is out there. Often, great design is about knowing where your users are coming from and their sophistication level, and then progressively advancing the design to ease them into what you may already know is best for them. As an example, for many of you out there, the healthcare industry is an industry that has been relatively slow to adopt new technology. And in the medical encounter form, this is that form that the doctor gives you when you check out, detailing the services that they provide and what maybe labs that you may need. Is one of those items that is still in large part, still done on paper today. And as it turns out, this is because the doctors are so used to it, they have more or less, memorized where the items are on that page and can fill it out very rapidly, if not blindfolded. And when they were presented with a digital screen, even in the form of an iPad, the form requires scrolling because it was or the fields were too narrow for the doctor to accurately record the correct procedures. So there was a lot of error and thus inefficiencies that ended up happening. We may all know and recognize that this will eventually be completely digitized. Everyone knows that, but we need to explore options that are going to help either the doctor's behavior to evolve and change, or as in the case, or allow new technologies to come to surface that may speed that behavioral change along. One of the best examples for this is the iPad, because the iPad did come in, and the ability to maneuver and walk into with the patients and so forth has really helped bridge a lot of those gaps and barriers that we were seeing in the past. Now that we've discussed kind of the mindset of how we begin to think and approach mobile design, I'm going to discuss a couple of guidelines that are key to creating what is perceived to be a well-designed app. And there's always exceptions to the rules that I'm going to lay out, but sticking with these concepts will help ensure quality. I'm going to first discuss user experience design guidelines, and then in the next section I will discuss user interface or visual design guidelines that we talked to. And one of those first guidelines is as few features as possible. This is really the keep it simple rule. First and foremost, your mobile app needs to focus on the key activities that a user may be taking on mobile, and not necessarily trying to cram your whole system into a mobile app. For more complex apps, what we may be actually considering is multiple apps. Just because we have a mobile strategy does not mean that our one app should encompass the entire functionality of our system. And what you're seeing here is just a screenshot from iTunes for Wave Accounting. And Wave Accounting is a software as a service based accounting program that offers several different features on here: invoicing, receipts, payroll, in addition to bookkeeping. And as you can see here, though, they've divided some of these features into very targeted and focused apps that are oriented around key user activities. Keeping your apps simple, and even if that means fragmenting them around specific roles or usage scenarios, is going to help drive the quality of that one app up and really keep the engagement with your users both simple and good. Small screens, bigger targets. This really is that fat finger rule. We want to give the user easy targets to avoid error and ease their understanding of the system. Intelligently defining, tap areas like the entire photo on the example on the right, rather than just, for example, the title of the article, can really help, a lot of this out. So in mobile app designs, what we've seen is a lot of the usage of photography as buttons, where now you're seeing a dual purpose between both showcasing the product or the examples that we want the users to engage or react to, while also giving them that very large tappable surface area so that they can dive deeper into those details. Require as little user input as possible. If we have a deep understanding of the user's journey and context of the use, then we can begin to predict their needs. In this manner, we want to leverage the phone's native capabilities and information as much as possible so that we can better serve the user. This comes from simple things like ensuring the keyboard is oriented for the type of input expected, or in the case of Uber on the right, leveraging the phone's GPS capabilities to put the user within one tap of hailing a car. The important facet here is that with touchscreen displays and now the mobile phone's native capabilities like GPS, we are provided with a tremendous amount of not only features or capabilities, I should say, but data that can help inform us on what a user may be opening up our app for. Learning and how to leverage this data and how to responsibly apply it to our designs can really help streamline a user's use of the app and enhance their experience. Minimize text and instructions. This is something that mobile has really launched forward tremendously. An unfortunate side effect of mobile is that users are much more easily distracted and impatient than before, which means they don't really have time to quote unquote learn your app before they use it. What users expect today is the ability to dive in and hit the ground running with your app. And to this end, for more complex apps with hidden interactions like swipe to reveal, etc., onboarding needs to be guided, fast, and then ultimately consumable in one instance. Google Inbox, as an example, helps the user with these 4 paginated instructions. Each instruction comes with no more than 2 sentences and has an animated capacity to further enhance what they're showcasing and what can be done. These animations are important for the user basically to get oriented and begin using the app's primary or core features. And then and allows the user to kind of hit the ground running and then discover other options, and complexity later on after they've become accustomed with the primary use case of the app. Alternatively, Clear is a to-do list or task manager, has taken a different approach that we're seeing happen increasingly today, bringing the user immediately into the app interface with some pre-populated data that instructs the user on how to use the app through the app's own interface. Users, tend to react very well to this because it no longer feels like a training session. What they're able to do is to begin playing and interacting with the app, which is right at the outset, and hit that ground running while not feeling obstructed from actually going in and building, their new to-do list, as an example in this case. And then last but not least, as far as UX mobile guidelines, easy readability and interactions. Because people interact with mobile devices in fast, short spurts, we want to make sure they are able to consume as much information as quickly as possible. Key to this is keeping a very clean and legible interface that follows a defined page hierarchy and allows users to easily distinguish, between title text, body text, and calls to action on the page. This, effectively allows the user to scan, consume, and take action towards their desire, basically, as quickly as possible. And the Medium app, I think, does a great job of taking something like blogging that can be very, very text heavy, and cleanly formatting it to show distinctions between title text, items that can be clickable, and as well as body text. In this manner, the user can skip through and scan titles quickly and then dive into specific areas that they'd like to just explore further. This concludes kind of our section of the user experience guidelines and offers, I think, a nice segue into the next topic of discussion regarding the keys to mobile visual design. And in this section, I'll talk briefly about a few visual design principles that will help to remove subjectivity and hopefully allow you to focus on what I believe to be the key details that differentiate good from the good from the great effectively. And as kind of a follow-on to easy readability and interactions as being a core UX guideline that should be focused on, the next one is that I'll talk about in UI is typography. In my opinion, this is one of the most important design elements of your app. It is effectively, the design of letters and can impact how quickly and easily users are able to consume information within your app, which is, for the most part, the ultimate reason that people are using your app in the first place. And there are 6 aspects really to consider in selecting, I think, the right typography for your 6 attributes, I should say, to typography that should be considered. One is, selecting a quality typeface. With the advent of web fonts, we have many more options in type than we did in the past. In addition to giving your app its own unique look and feel, these new typefaces can kind of help guide and direct users as to the importance and hierarchy of various information presented on the screen. And I'm not sure if you noticed in the Medium app that I showcased earlier, but they actually distinguish between serif and sans serif fonts in order to help the users distinguish between title texts and body texts. One thing I will say is that if you're insecure about selecting the wrong type, there are some de facto fonts out there like Helvetica Neue that offer a tremendous amount of weights and come in a lot of flavors that I would say are a safe and secure bet. Helvetica Neue is the font of science in the information age in many ways, and you can lean on it to convey information, specifications, and the basics in a very clean, confident way. And they offer, as I mentioned earlier, they offer a myriad of weights that make it ideal, for product design to give your app a specific flavor. A second facet to font and the consideration of what you're using for are monospaced versus variable spaced fonts. And in the example above, what I'm intending to show is 2 fonts of the same size, end up occupying different amounts of space. And a monospaced font, also called a fixed width font, is a font whose letters and characters each occupy, the same amount of horizontal space. And as the example says, that is why they're great for neat alignment and things like tables or in all the markup text editors that the developers use. This helps with very neat alignment and legibility. This contrasts with variable width fonts, which where the letters and spacings have varying widths, and variable space fonts are better suited for articles, where we need to try to fit more text in a limited amount of space. Next facet is hierarchy. Hierarchy signifies, importance by structuring something to be more or less obvious. And it clearly separates information to signal a change from one level of content to another. And I've alluded, to this in many ways, but items in higher contrast to things around them are recognized first. Why is this important in mobile design? Well, because we're having to present a user with a lot of information in a condensed amount of space, what we want them to do is allow their eyes to track towards the information where they know their answer will be. Oftentimes, if, with the example on the screen, this may be, reading through the titles to find that story that is appealing to them. And what this then does is allows the brain to work through the information in a serial way as they comb through the screen. Weight. So weight reduces the density of information through heavy and light stroke changes. Balancing type weights can be a delicate process, but to make it easier, you want to focus on the content. You identify the essentials in your body and display content of your product's equivalent, and then work from there to develop a system of weights. This is, just sort of the rule of, having titles in bold and then, regular text in a book or a lightweight font. And these can be leveraged in various ways. Once again, it is all about attempting to direct the user towards the correct information, balancing important information or highly sensitive information with lower important or less important decision-making information. The parallel to this is contrast, and contrast is something that must be taken into account when you're using multiple type weights, as we described earlier. Defining the relationship of the content first, and then assigning weights that are, that properly represents them. Users can better navigate your design, when there are clear differences and associations between the content. I will remind you that there are no hard and fast rules, except to be cautious when using weights and sizes that are too close to one another. Users should be able to scan the content and identify those differences quickly, and that is, ultimately what we're attempting to showcase between the first example and the second example. And then last but not least, in mobile, and this is particularly important, I believe, in responsive web design, but is scale. Specifying your type in EMS will help keep a hierarchical consistency across your app and across your information, from a design perspective, regardless of screen size or resolutions. Scale creates consistency in sizing across elements, ensuring that your original design never breaks, even if a user has, zoom enabled on their device or zoom enabled it within their browser. A visual type scale, effectively sets a ratio between the different type elements, and it'll preserve that scale as the user, zooms in or zooms out of information. And so, last but not least, what I want to kind of end this on is to remember that good font is invisible. When properly implemented and really well done, it is meant to allow users to focus on the information they are consuming and not, the font itself standing in the way of it just by virtue of the type's design. This is important because, only fellow designers are actually going to appreciate, the decisions or the thought that went into the use of type, use of the type or the typography that you use. While your average user is going to say things like, I can't explain it. This is just nicer. It looks nicer. Um, and the reason I bring that up is because as we do a lot of user research and user testing, there are certain things that we look to test whether the font is doing that, but it isn't an overt question as to whether or not users like the font that is being used. So what we're going to do now is the next aspect of UI design is working in shades of gray and then slowly adding color. Designing in grayscale before adding color allows us to simplify the most complex element of visual design and then forces you to focus on spacing and laying out of elements to drive usability. We start with the harder problem of making the app beautiful and usable in every way, but without the aid of color. The black and white forces you to focus on things like the spacing and the sizing of the elements first, and then those are the primary concerns of a clean and simple design. Once we've done that, we can begin to add color as a last resort, and even then only with purpose. And I'm showcasing just the Uber site because it was very grayscale, but that clear call to action just springs forward. Color has the ability to manipulate users towards specific areas of your app and towards specific calls to action. And what we want to be is very mindful with how we bring color into the app as it supports or detracts away from those actions we're hoping for them, for the users to pursue. I bring this example up here, which is a marketing site, but having too many colors in too many places can give your app a lot of personality. But it is also a really easy way to mess up clean and simple and distract your users. In this context, users don't really know, what is the primary call to action that they need to or should be pushing on. And rather, this is more for marketing purposes, which has its place, is intended to just grab the user's eyes and let them, decide for themselves. Obeying the laws of physics. People respond to items they perceive as real. And when designing for digital, we are given many options to go beyond what can normally be done in the real world. However, that doesn't mean we should take advantage of those. Subconsciously, our minds react and understand things that conform to the laws of physics, like how light behaves. And light comes from the sky, so we should design accordingly. And when we incorporate these details, of an interface, it's going to help users begin to wrap their head around the idea of a button being pressed down or the usage, of a slider within the screen. And all of these help us to translate, what is today a flat and cold surface, which would be your phone screen, for example, into something that looks and feels a little more tactile and that can also aid in the understanding of how to use a specific app. And to this, I believe that you've all probably have heard, the word skeuomorphism versus flat. Skeuomorphism is a design concept that can aid in helping users understand how to use things. But skeuomorphism, for skeuomorphism's sake, is just art and can have a negative impact on usability. And what I'm showcasing here is two examples or iterations of the Apple incarnations, I should say, of the Apple Calculator app. The Calculator app on the left was inspired by an old Braun Dieterham's design for a calculator, and it brought these nice bevel items to the buttons and things like that. But where it began to impede the usability of the app is in tappable surface space. The design on the right, which is considered a flat design, has increased that tappable space to avoid inaccuracies, and it has better focus kind of around the core interactions that the users might take. So it has a little bit less functions or capabilities, but with the dynamic nature of a digital screen, if we turn this phone sideways, we get that scientific calculator appeal. So as you begin to consider skeuomorphic or flat design, it's not that one is better than the other, and these things do go through sort of cycles and trends, but skeuomorphic design was immensely valuable and important to our users, especially when the iPhone and iPads first came out, because it brought real-world context to interactions that users may not have known. And what I'd like if you take one thing away from here, skeuomorphism can facilitate understanding of how to use a component, but we want to be conscientious of its impact on screen real estate and ultimate usability as to whether or not it's relevant or if we are attempting to just be artistic. The second notion is layering thoughtfully. And this is a very important concept when it comes to mobile design, because the amount of data that needs to be presented affects the perceived complexity of applications. And when creating a UI, generally speaking, having as few elements as possible on the screen is usually the best approach, as we mentioned earlier. Simplifying UIs by removing unneeded navigation and UI elements is important to creating focus. But in some cases, it's more important to keep a higher level of information density. Small screens, as in like the traditional cell phones and so forth, show very little information per screen, which in turn leads to deep nested hierarchies of stacked up thin information, often leaving users at a loss as to where they are specifically in the app, and leaving them with that "where am I" puzzle and question. So in that sense, what we say is it's better to have users looking over material adjacent in space rather than stacked in time. And what adjacent in space is, this is a text-heavy slide, but it describes kind of what adjacent in space is alluding to. Mobile apps, just by virtue of their form factor, will stack information much more than desktop apps. And this is why workflows are not consistent, across a desktop and a mobile app. You have to decide between when a user should scroll for more information or stack information on top of each other. And the decision depends on use case and user intent. An airplane cockpit is probably an extreme example of this approach, or adjacent in space metaphor. It makes all of the controls readily available to the pilots, and then keeps critical readouts and important data ready at hand to help the pilots be able to make quick decisions. Conversely, the other approach is stacked in time, and stacked in time approach tends to make an application less intimidating because we're able to simplify the information down to nice bite-sized chunks of data that help to guide the user and doesn't overwhelm the user with choices. That being said, while it can simplify the screens tremendously, if we stack too much information in time, we're back at the initial problem, which is helping to keep the users oriented with where they are in the app. And so what I want to kind of bring up as an example of what this looks like in mobile is that we have two photo apps here, and the app on the right, while is really nice, is the Microsoft approach really forced users kind of to select, down a hierarchy of information, albums, before they were presented with um, data. The photo albums on the right, while maybe it's not as glamorous or sexy, for lack of a better word, in terms of its visual appeal, is providing users with information that is adjacent in time. Users are able to see kind of a quick snippet or overview of what photo is there, the title of the album, as well as the number of photos that exist within each album. All of these data points are intended to help the user determine, make a decision and determine where they want to go. The adjacent in space and stacked in time approaches, each has its own trade-offs. In most cases, placing too many elements on the screen at the same time creates unnecessary complexity, but also not all controls are needed at once, so they should only be presented when needed. So as kind of a closing thought around this, be thoughtful of user orientation in your app, and also in determining what the key data points are that they need to make a decision to progress in order to progress, to the next phase. And there, I only have two more items as it relates to visual design, but white space is your friend. A lot of people, especially in enterprise, tend to be very afraid of too much white space because they say, their users value information density. And there is a time and place for information density, and I'm not alluding to the not having information density, but rather to leverage white space, when necessary, to help streamline legibility and improve the efficiency for your users. A clean layout is approachable, and opens up the mental space to allow users to kind of get into the flow, helping them to clear clutter and then remove guesswork from a user's gaze. This can be where we've seen a lot of thought process around this is, how thick do we need to make the rows, within a table of data for the users? Because there is a balance between allowing the users to know when that next piece of data, that next record exists, with their ability to easily be able to read those elements, each line item, I should say. And white space can really help, guide the user's eyes, to those intended areas. And this is just recapping, a clean layout is approachable and opens up mental space to get the user into the flow for what we want. And then last but not least, steal like a professional. And there is that famous quote, that great artists steal. But and what I want to emphasize here is that stealing from nature and completely other industries around you can lead to transformative innovations. We see this first version of this iPad, which was heavily influenced by a Braun design from a very different era, and resurfacing and being inspired by that innovation, helped to lead to one of the most transformational objects in this century as it relates, and how we kind of consume music today. Stealing, like a professional does not mean going in and saying, copying someone else's design or work. That obviously is bad, but it's really about trying to mimic design patterns and interactions that of other apps your users may commonly use, something like an email interface for a very different purpose, which can have a tangible user benefit and help you ease the user's learning curve. And So just along those lines, and to kind of help close, this presentation out, I'll leave you with one last thought, which is consistency is one of the most powerful usability principles. And when things always behave the same, users don't have to worry about what will happen. Instead, they know what will happen based on earlier experiences. So we try to really architect all the apps we do, and a lot of these principles are trying to drive home this point, when we talk about the atomic designs to even, and this becomes a very big topic of discussion for what will happen next time, which is, potentially the iOS versus Android quick primer, and why, those two designs need to be different. With that, I want to say thank you very much for taking the time to listen to me.